From alien invaders to gods of destruction, the Dragon Ball franchise has given us one of the most iconic lineup of villains in shonen history, with a variety of characters that many deem to be their favorites. So join me as I do my best to rank and dissect the many characters that have dared to take on the Z Fighters. And it's only right that we start back at the beginning with the Pilaf gang. Dragon Ball characters are so strong nowadays. It's funny that at one point in time, a little monster, a woman, and a dog were real threats to the protagonists. Maybe real threats is a little strong, but they did provide some resistance to the main cast. Dragon Ball at that point was more of an adventure comedy than anything, and the Pilaf gang did make me chuckle sometimes, but simply based on the nature of their group and my personal taste, they definitely aren't at the top of my rankings, but I respect them for being a big part in the progression of this story. I'll place them comfortably in B tier. Next up is the Red Ribbon Army, and who knew that back when this group was introduced that they'd have such staying power in this franchise. They are responsible for a character who could easily be considered a top 3 Dragon Ball villain and many others that are fan favorites, but unfortunately, the army itself in Dragon Ball isn't even close to being a favorite of mine. Whether it's watching Commander Red act like a child, or Goku taking down the giant and Major Metallotron, Murasaki making a fool of himself, this group never seemed threatening in the slightest. I mean, Android 8 was built up to be their secret weapon, but he ended up being a friend of Goku. The group isn't terrible, but they're nothing to write home about either. I'm placing them in C, and I'm placing Mercenary Tao in C as well. He was surely a powerful foe, but there was nothing more to him than that. Now in the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai, the Korean school was a direct opposition to the protagonist, but I think Tien was the only one impactful enough to talk about now. I think the best thing about Tien during this time was his cruel nature. He was such an opposite to Goku in terms of how he fought, and the anticipation for their fight was fueled by that. He broke Yamcha's leg for no good reason, beat Roshi, but all the while he was changing. He battled physically, but he also battled psychologically. He couldn't help but think that what he learned from Shin and Tao was wrong, because although Tien was ruthless, he had a great deal of respect for the martial arts and fairness, and he began to question if that's what the Korean school stood for. So although Tien technically won the physical battle against Goku, the real war taking place was based on ideologies, and Goku won that in dramatic fashion. I put Tien in A tier. It just sucks that his development as a character stops in the 22nd Tenkaichi Budokai. Then you have Demon King Piccolo. I mean, what tier would be fitting for the character that changed the direction for the entire franchise, whose ties and motivations to the main cast go back for generations in the story? A character so formidable that the only known way to beat him was to seal them away with a move that cost the user their life, and most importantly, gave Goku a fight that pushed him to his absolute limits and left us with one of the most iconic moments in the franchise. To put Demon King Piccolo any lower than Z would be criminal. And although his son is one of the best characters in the franchise, it's not as a villain. All Piccolo did as an antagonist was raid around to fight Goku in a tournament setting, a setting where he legally would not be able to exact the type of revenge he wanted on Goku. Both Goku and Piccolo lived through that battle and did not nearly have the same level of animosity between each other in comparison to Goku and Demon King Piccolo. I'll put Piccolo in B tier. Now Dragon Ball Z starts off with 3 Saiyans as villains, and the first is the brother of Goku, Raditz. He contextualized all of Goku's life, which needed some kind of explanation, kidnapped Goku's son, and forced sworn enemies to work together to bring him down. And in the end, their efforts resulted in the death of the main character. Easy A tier choice for me. Then there's Nappa. Nappa gets lost in the shuffle when the topic of great Dragon Ball villains comes up. I get that he wasn't the main antagonist of an arc, but man, he put in some work. The situation on Earth seemed hopeless until Goku arrived and Nappa was solely responsible. His stature combined with his dialogue and strength made it very easy for me as an audience member to dislike him, and my desire to see Nappa brought down was only exacerbated when he essentially killed 3 Z fighters. And even though he lost against Goku, as a villain he played his role very well. Through him, Toriyama displayed just how much stronger Goku had gotten during his time in Otherworld. I put Nappa in Z tier, and I put Vegeta there as well. I mean, this one is pretty obvious. He's the first major villain in Dragon Ball Z and gave Goku a battle that laid the groundwork for one of the most popular rivalries in fiction. With every trump card the Z fighters threw at him, he bounced back to show just how outrageously strong he was. If anybody disagrees with him and Z, I'd love to hear it. Now this next placement may shock you. Again, you force on some of the most underrated antagonists in the Dragon Ball franchise. Think back to when you first watched the Frieza arc and how obvious it was that Frieza was the main antagonist, but just how long it took to see him in action. Through their interactions, it was clear that the Ginyu Force was much weaker than Frieza, but they absolutely dominated Gohan, Krillin, and Vegeta. They definitely helped build a similar sense of hopelessness that Nappa did on Earth. And in the same way that Nappa was great in highlighting Goku's new strength, the Ginyu Force was great as well. I'll put them in A tier. A moment ago I mentioned how it took us a long time to see Frieza in action. Well, it was worth the wait. I believe this iteration of Frieza is the best antagonist in the entire franchise, easily. His motives were pure evil, he lacked any kind of real backstory, which helped me not to see anything from his point of view. I can imagine that a murderous sociopath would be impossible to truly get along with if he were real, but he also had this charisma that made loving him as a character so much easier. Z tier without a question. Now the androids are all over the place. 19 and 20, specifically 19, weren't anything special. 17 and 18 in future Trunks' time seemed like some real villains, but the ones in the main timeline really didn't care about the rest of the world. They just wanted to kill Goku. Same thing applies to 16, yet he's even more peaceful than they were. 19 and 20 I put in C, 16 I'll put him in C as well, then I'll put 17 and 18 in B. Speaking of 17 and 18, Cell was a much more entertaining character when he needed those two. Perfect Cell was just strong. He never truly seemed evil until the odds were stacked against him, and ironically enough, it was when he lost his perfect form that he resorted to something truly evil. I'll put Cell at the top of B. This is the first time a character will make this list twice, and it's Vegeta. Vegeta allowing himself to be possessed by Babidi went against everything he stood for, but it proved just how important his rematch with Goku was. See, the reason Majin Vegeta is going to be high up on this list is because there was so much tied into him becoming an antagonist again. He felt that Goku embarrassed him because he saved his life. He allowed himself to be possessed and refused his ruler's orders, showing just how much Saiyan pride he has. And at this point, Vegeta had a family and he went down this path knowing that it wasn't in their best interest for him to conduct himself this way. This is something Vegeta held on to for over 10 years, and the blatant lack of consideration for anyone else around him highlighted his dedication. Not to mention, he was a big reason in why Majin Buu was released when he was. Unfortunately, I can't add his atonement in my reasoning for his placement because Majin Vegeta when he fought against Buu definitely wasn't a villain, so I'd put him in A. And then there's Buu, the last big antagonist of Dragon Ball Z. I don't care if he was fat, gray, had a nose, or if he was shirtless. I'm not a fan of any version of Majin Buu. Now some are better than others, but they average out to about a C. Now let's move into the modern era of Dragon Ball, and the first antagonist here is Beerus, one of the many characters who have been changed by Goku, but before that he was determined to find the Super Saiyan God, a search that ended up in him wanting to destroy the Earth. All of the Z fighters that stood against him were handled with ease until Goku finally showed up and achieved the Super Saiyan God transformation. I put Beerus in A. And after Beerus, we have a second character making another appearance on this list, and that is Frieza in Resurrection F because he is not the same as he was on Namek. It is likely that my opinion on him here is largely based on this iteration not being the major antagonist with an entire arc and more detailed story behind him, but I don't care. In this situation, the remix was nowhere near as good as the original, C tier, and his universal counterpart Frost is in D tier. Let's move on. Now, Zamasu's motivations are sinister, but they make sense. He committed heinous acts in pursuit of his goal and had no regard for anyone outside of himself. Pretty good groundwork for a Dragon Ball villain. And everything was going smoothly with both Zamasus, but it went left when they fused and became the universe. It just wasn't a good way for his character to go out. All in all, I'm still a fan, and I put him in A tier. There were many quote-unquote antagonists in the Tournament of Power, but I think we can all agree that Jiren is the only one worth talking about. Or is he? From what I've seen and heard, most people don't rock with Jiren. I don't think he's great either, but I definitely understand him as an opposing force to Goku. Goku is a warrior who has fought for the lives of his friends many times and knows that without them he wouldn't be half the fighter that he is. That isn't how Jiren thinks though. He's quite selfish and believes that one's own strength is the most important. To have emotional attachments makes one weak, and I respect Jiren's unbelievable strength, but he doesn't have much else to him as a character. I put him at the bottom of B. Broly's reintroduction into the franchise was refreshing, and I was happy to see that he was a more fleshed out character with the potential to be a part of the story going forward. I put him in A. Cell Max though, he sucks. Nothing about him is interesting. Nothing. D tier. Now the GT villains I'll speed through because I have given my opinion on this show and these characters before. Baby is a B. Super 17 is an F. The Shadow Dragons as a whole are a D, but Sin and Nova are in C tier. Looking at this list, I think I did a pretty good job. But what do you think? What would you switch around and where did I get it wrong? Let me know down in the comments. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video or any of the other ones you've seen on my channel, please leave a like and subscribe. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers and everyone counts. Again, this is BigTune and thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one.